Khiara decided it was boring and it didn't make the final cut.
What are you doing there, Adam? Yeah. Pretty sure there is a song about this, but you can see that it's significantly further towards me if I pull it now. We had a little incident.
Yeah.
Welcome to our self-inflicted adventure.
What seems like a lifetime ago, we left Australia intending to sail our way around the world.
It's been a roller coaster since then, and while the plan has changed many times, we've been laughing our way through and learnt a new lesson for every step of the way.
And between us, the real adventure has only just begun.
Last episode on sailing Millennial Falcon. I'm really glad that we actually went sailing today. Where's there?
Grand case. Behind that rock.
So I'm an absolute numpty.
So it's a sunny but blustery day over here in Grand Case. We thought we'd take this opportunity, having now tested the sails and being very impressed with them, to sort of dial in the rig as best we can. I did make mention of this in the last video, but Khiara decided that it was boring and it didn't make the final cut. Seaweed, that's what's up. We were tuning the rig, like tightening everything up, and we were checking the rake angle, and I feel like we've got a little bit too much rake. Some of the comments last week mentioned that the main was backfilling from the headsail, and made the suggestion to put a Cunningham on, which would fix a lot of that. And they're right, but we don't have a Cunningham, so basically all we have is a bang, main sheet, and a traveller, and the halyard. But we're consistently overpowered on the main, and I suspect that's because the rake angle is a little bit too far back, which moves the centre of pressure rearward, which means that we're forever trying to depower the main. Yeah, we're going to go. Had previously sort of redone the rig, just tightening everything up and cranking on the backstay a little, trying to straighten out the forestay and generally just tuning it in. And there's a little bit of rake in the mast, and that's inducing weather helm. And I think that was probably in error. I think we're going to go back to as little or no rake as possible. So what I'm going to do today is take a bunch of turns off the backstay and put a bunch of turns on the forestay, and then sort of retune the rest of the stays to get the mast nice and straight and ratchet it down good and tight, and see if we can ease off some of that weather helm. And if all of that was Greek to any of you, I've got a little book here that kind of explains what I'm trying to do in a neat little picture. The Annapolis Book of Seamanship. All boats have sails and a hull. You have a centre of effort for each sail. So your jib, your staysail if you have one, your main, your mizzen main if you have one, they all have their own centre of effort. And they come together to give you sort of your average centre of effort. You also have a centre of lateral resistance, which is the point about which a boat will rotate. Or it's technically true because all bodies rotate around the centre of gravity. I digress. Centre of lateral resistance, the boat will rotate around that. So what you want to do is keep your centre of effort, your average centre of effort, basically over the top or near enough to your centre of lateral resistance so that those two forces don't counteract each other. If you imagine we're sailing along like this boat and the centre of effort is pulling out of the page, and the centre of lateral resistance, being the force on the keel, is counteracting that and going into the page. While those two forces are kind of on top of each other, they're basically exactly opposed, and as such no rotation is generated. But as you sort of shift those two forces apart, they start to create rotation. aka weather helm or lee helm, which is what we're trying to change. By loosening off the backstay, tightening on the forestay and shifting the mast forward, I'm shifting my average center of effort forward, hopefully bringing it closer to the center of lateral resistance, which will ease that rotational force, which is called weather helm. That's what we're doing today. So what I'm doing here is I've got a kettlebell on the main halyard, which obviously runs up and down the back of the mast. It's pretty rough because it's windy and it's rolly, and I'm sort of keeping it sort of where it wants to hang, but it does illustrate, you know, how much rearwards rake the mast has. Obviously you would assume that if the mast was straight up and down, the kettlebell would be straight up and down. It would be hanging right against the mast, which it's not. It very obviously wants to tend backwards under its own weight. Unfortunately, the wind is helping as well. Really bad. Need a bigger.
What are you doing there, Adam?
Well, it's not heavy enough to compensate for the wind, so I figure I could add to the...
Pretty sure there is a song about this.
What?
I came in like a
Khiara's anthem. Your anthem, not mine. Okay, that's definitely straight up and down. Okay. Yeah. Really accurate stuff here aboard the Millennial Falcon this morning. Really high resolution stuff. Okay. Oh.
Well, in summary, we knew that we had really bad weather helm from us going sailing. So we know that we have a bit too much rake at the moment, so we're gonna just fix it anyway. Even if we can't get the most accurate measurement with a kettlebell and with old mate hanging off it.
Barry's back.
What?
Barracuda's followed us. What did I say the other day about Barracuda? Without fail,
They love you.
They love the black hole on this boat. This guy's been creeping on us for about a day now.
It's such nice water here and you want to go for a swim. And not when that one's just hanging around.
I poked him with the boat hook this morning and he just sort of swam around in a circle, turned around and looked at me, and then just kind of loitered there. He said, hasn't been scared away at all. He's probably waiting for me to get in the water now. So you can see there that I've just removed the two nuts here. I've pried these bars away and it's lifted up under the tension of this halyard, which is now supporting the furler. And I've got access to the flat spot on the swage and the turnbuckle, so I can now tighten it up. And then when I want to put them back, I'll sort of be here and Khiara eases the halyard as I talk to her, and we just sort of say stop and bang them onto the thread and do it up.
Okay, so we'll try and wait for a calm spot, but you can see that it's significantly further towards me. If I fill it now, but you'll see that it's significantly further towards me, which means that we have managed to make the rake a lot better and bring the mast forward this way. All right, it's time to go and test this rigging. I'm gonna go for a sail down a couple of bays and see whether what we've done has changed it. See whether the weather helm isn't too bad anymore. Bye, Barracuda. Okay. The gob cam is in action.
So far the helm feels really light. We've got a pretty relaxed 14 knots. There's a little bit of I have to steer into windward, or sorry, to leeward rather. No, steer into windward to counteract the weather helm. No, steer into leeward. What am I talking about? It's not that bad. the wheel doesn't want to compensate and the boat's not changing course, so it's sort of not that bad. We didn't say this in the video, but the other day actually we
had a little incident.
Yeah. Would you like to tell the story, yeah?
Sure. So we had a little incident whereby we lost our steering. Luckily for us, we were only going 2 minutes down the road, pretty much just to get some flat water so that one of us could go up the mast. The bay that we were in was ridiculously wavy. So anyway, I started the engine, and at the time I was like, oh, this steering feels quite jiggly. To the stage where when the anchor was up, we could literally just fling it to one side and the steering wheel would go whee! Fling it to the other side and the steering would go whee! We weren't too worried, as we were literally just going in a straight line, and so we're both like, okay, as long as there aren't any boats in our path and we don't hit anyone, we should just be able to go in a straight line, pop an anchor back down again. So we weren't too stressed. Later on that day, we took up the back of the, we took all of the bedding up and discovered that the steering cables had actually come off the rack. And we think that is because Adam was just messing around with an autopilot earlier on in the day, and he had locked off the steering wheel but then tried to put the autopilot on. So the autopilot was really trying to go to the right and couldn't because the steering wheel was locked off. I feel like I've heard that story before somewhere.
In the last hour, the sun has gone down, the moon has come up, we lost the autopilot, which accidentally attacked us, which was quickly corrected.
So Adam, I think you have a confession for people.
As it turns out, I was half right the other day when I said that the autopilot's new gremlin was a problem of my own making. I think 3 nights ago now, when we lost the autopilot and we were leaking and all that disaster. It was probably the middle of the night. We had just tacked back to shore. We're about 30 miles off the coast on the way to Marathon. And I don't know why I did it. I think I was just tired, and I felt there's a grub screw or a tensioner screw on the side of the steering column, and I tightened it up because everything on a boat should be tight and fitting and snug. Nothing should be loose and sugary. That's wrong. Anyway, last night I was manually steering and I was getting tired of trying to find a heading. I was like, let's loosen off the steering a bit. Anyway, we were using the autopilot intermittently as like a steering clutch. And guess what? It starts behaving. It starts moving around on maximum sensitivity, doesn't miss a beat, everything is fine, and it hasn't died for like 12 hours. Lo and behold, I over-tightened the steering column, over-tightened the tension in the steering, and it was overpowering the autopilot and causing it to intermittently give up and say you're on your own.
Anyway, lesson learned. Back to the main story.
Well, yeah, so the outcome of that, what the issue was that somehow, and I'm kind of glad it happened that way as opposed to breaking something, the steering cable rolled off the quadrant and it was all still attached, but it wasn't on the quadrant, and so it was only working at the very end of the cable just ever so slightly. So we obviously corrected that, but when we did, we just kind of did a bit of a bodge job on the cable tension, so sort of moving things ever so slightly, and I feel like the king spoke is not where it should be anymore, and I suspect that perhaps the rudder sensor is also a little bit off, because where we unknowingly adjusted the steering to is not sort of rudder dead center. So whilst you're driving along, you still, you just drive, you don't really focus on where the steering wheel is, you just drive. But when your instruments are telling you one thing and the boat's telling you another, and you're sort of doing this and the boat's not going anywhere, you're like, well, that's supposed to be dead center, but the king spoke's down here. I don't know, I feel like we need to just go and double check everything and make sure it's all straight and correct before we get too excited about how much rudder is being put in and whatnot. I mean, at this stage, I can tell you now the helm feels much lighter than it did the other day. And it's certainly, like the other day we were coming down and we had 18 to sort of 20 something knots with the same sail configuration. And I was standing here with a straight arm and a hand on the spoke, just like hauling it to windward, just locked off like that. And if I let it go, it would just round up into wind. So significant improvement thus far. And we're sort of, the wind's behind the beam, tending to the beam. And so we're sort of, the head sail could be cranked on a bit further for this angle of the wind. I think that's fine. I think the hydrovane could more than keep up with this level of helm.
experiment postponed for another day until we can get that rudder situation under control. It's not bad, just it could be better.
So a moderately successful test. I think we've definitely improved the weather helm. It's just so hard to test it without consistent wind, and you know, it's gusting anywhere between 90 degrees and 15 knot change in the wind. It's just impossible to know whether you've got it set up wrong or it's the balance of the boat or the rake angle that's doing it. So we'll call it for today. We're here in Marigot. We've just put a hook in. We will jump in and dive on the anchor and just wash off the day. Khiara's just going to go back to the boat, whip it in reverse for a little bit longer, just dragging it back into the sand. It doesn't look like it has dragged at all, but it's not dug in enough yet. Rather not leave it to chance.